Welcome, everyone, to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host, and we are continuing our coverage of Visions Volume 2 with The Spy Dancer. And joining me for all of these episodes is my good friend, Hammie. Welcome back, Hammie.
Yay!
Where can people find you if they're looking for you online?
I'm on Twitter at BalancePadawan.
Awesome. Let's dig into this one. This was a fascinating episode.
It was probably one of my favorites of
Really?
not that we're picking favorites, but it's one of my favorites. Yes, definitely like top 3, top 4. I loved them all, but this was one of my favorites.
This studio was Studio like Cachette.
That would be how I pronounce it.
Yeah. And the director was Julian Chang, and it's from France. And you could kind of tell because I think this is one of those ones where, like, from the Spanish studio, the voice actors did it in English and then also did it in French.
Yes, I could have mentioned it at the very top, but all of these were made in English, actually, but the voice actors, you can tell their accents. Even in the Indian one, you can tell that they have the accents of their place of origin. It's kind of cool compared to the last set of Visions. They were all from Japanese studios. So it's, at least to me, it seems really cool to have all of the different languages present. I think the only one that was originally in its origin, language of origin was the previous one, Journey to the Dark Head, I believe.
Oh, okay.
It was originally recorded in Korean and then dubbed to English.
Interesting.
But otherwise, all of the rest of the ones, the creators said they were comfortable doing it in English, and they chose to do that.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This itself was so fascinating. So we have an intro. It's a city under imperial control. It's dark and rainy, but there's one spot of light amongst this dark city, which is a cabaret building up on the hill with lights, and troopers are piling in for drinks and to see the show.
It's a really fun setting.
It is.
we love a cantina, but now we love a cabaret.
Oh, now we love a cabaret, yeah. And is kind of how she's pronounced her name. She's like sort of the assistant, and she introduces the troopers to Lois Falles, which totally felt like out of like Folie Bergère, which is a famous cabaret in France, or Moulin Rouge, which was mentioned by the creators. I also got a lot of cabaret, the musical vibes from this episode specifically, because there's a lot of like the spies and the occupied city feeling, as well as you wrote in the notes Casablanca.
Yes, which isn't a cabaret, but it's a bar that also on the side has dealings while there's a war going on. The creators actually had mentioned as well that they had used real life inspirations. Mata Hari from World War I, she was a courtesan and dancer, and then Josephine Baker, who was part of the French resistance in World War II. Both of them were gathering information at parties. It's such a cool setting. Like, I know we've repeated it over and over, but the fact that people are drawing cultural influences from, their country of origin, but then setting it in Star Wars, it just makes it so unique. Like, these are things that we haven't seen, and the way they're pulling from them and adds so much depth to the story. The episode is called The Spy Dancer, so there's a dancer who is, spying.
A spy, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. So the troopers, they come in and they're all excited. They're ready to have a good time. Why would they be worried that, they're kind of invading the city? They just think, oh, these citizens of this have no issue with us being in occupying their city. And so they kind of just sit down for drinks. And what we find out is that Lua and her band of dancers and servers and all of them are, while they're dancing around, they stick these communication devices onto the troopers so that they can gather information and spy on them.
They're putting these kind of like recording / tracking mechanisms. I think they were also kind of tracking mechanisms to track where all the troops are, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there's kind of a major theme that starts to develop, like with the flashes between the troopers and the behind the scenes group, which is sort of like this kind of dialogue about freedom and getting out. Like, that's kind of like the theme that is kind of in there. But then there's also like this responsibility to those that are left behind and those that have already fallen. And those two things are kind of paired against each other within this episode.
Yes, before the dance act starts, Loa and her coworkers, I should say friends, they have a meeting right before the dance starts, kind of like a toast before starting the night, before starting the dance. And like you had said, there's another character named John who Loa has been in communication with, her ally on the outside, and she's you can tell that Loa has been part of the rebellion, and she's kind of disillusioned a little bit too. She doesn't know if this has all been worth it because she's lost so much, because they all have lost so much, and so she wants to figure out a way to get out of the city. And John is her kind of source on the outside, and so they have this kind of cheers moment, and she says exactly what you had mentioned, to the ones that we've lost. It kind of just starts off the dance in such a melancholy kind of way. Something that the troopers are just there to have a good time and have fun. But then you see on the inside, all of this is happening with the other characters.
Yeah. And her outfit itself, like, so she gets kind of like dropped in, and the dance and the animation is gorgeous. It's sort of like a butterfly outfit mixed with a veiled dance outfit. So like the Dance of the Seven Veils, it's certainly anything that involves veils symbolically represents misdirection or obscuring the truth.
Yes. It kind of harkens back to all of those courtesan references we had mentioned earlier, is where they're using the veils to kind of hide their facial expressions and what their actual goals are for the dance.
Seduction itself comes from a place of, like, with the veiled dance. The veiled dance specifically ties to sort of telling the story of Inanna's journey to the underworld to meet her sister. That's actually what it is. As she is stripped with all of her layers, it's like the Inanna dance, which I've talked about on the podcast before. Inanna, or Ishtar, is Inanna is the Sumerian name. Ishtar is the Babylonian name. Is the goddess of love, beauty, or fertility. But specifically, she has this like very it's called out a lot in the hero's journey in the heroine's journey, because of how important it is for women to go to the underworld to meet the dark version of the goddess. And when you go down there, there's like a sacrifice that has to be made to go down into the underworld. And it's just really fascinating that all of that imagery, butterflies, which represent rebirth and transformation and hope, are tied with this like stripping and like degradation that is happening in the dance, as it is like visually very tied to the Dance of the Seven Veils.
It was really beautiful to see it, and the way that they're able to kind of, that it's obviously an informed decision that they were making to make it part of her costume. It's kind of to visualize it, it's kind of like those aerial artists. Loa is
silks.
Yes, that kind of fabric. And then beneath her veils, beneath all of those pieces of her fabric, are the trackers. And she's kind of able to distract the troopers on one hand with a flick of her veil, and then simultaneously also snap into place the trackers onto them. It's really, really cool. Yeah, just the way it was animated was amazing.
She is distracted by an officer who looks exactly like the officer that stole her baby, and we get the flashback to the stolen baby situation. He has the same droid, he has the same jacket, he has the same hat, he has the same cane, he has the same emblem. He looks exactly like him in the shadow of the cabaret.
Yeah, of course.
One of his eyes is damaged. Of course, we can't really see that until it gets like a little closer up, but that's really, really important.
Yes.
Yeah.
So at that point, she can only see one eye from the officer, and Loa herself has heterochromia. She has two colored eyes. And also these horns on her head. And it's revealed later who this person is based on the heterochromia. It's really cool. It's a real cool choice doing that.
At this point, she's like determined on revenge. So she tells Hedis to take everyone and leave. And she tells John, like, this is the only way I can be free. So like this idea of, I don't know, I'm going to call out Andor, one way out. Like there's only one way out, and it's revenge for her, right? She only has this direction. It's important because in the end, freedom is not revenge, it's resolution. And that's like integrating these broken pieces of yourself. And she is broken. She's carrying the shadow of her stolen baby from years and years and years ago. The whole mood of the place changes. And the conductor says in French, I have a bad feeling about this.
He was really cute and funny.
It's very John Williams.
Yeah, that was immediately who I thought of. And the music keeps playing while this is happening because, of course, we got to keep the distraction going so they can get rid of as many troopers as they can. And she can, of course, distract the officer. So
the dance itself changes to like these red tones, and it almost looks like a whirling fire. It's very cool. And she jumps up and spots the officer and goes in for the kill, but pauses.
And what you had referenced, that her outfit looked like a butterfly. In that moment when she grabs him, she kind of wraps him up in the cocoon. Yeah. And takes it, and almost like a butterfly, she kind of uses the her cocoon to take him up above the cabaret. The glass is broken, so she's able to go up onto the roof. And it's only there that she realizes who he is to her, that he is her lost baby.
Yeah, I think she realizes right away when she sees his eyes, and that's why she stops. But it's interesting. So one of his eyes is damaged, and that sort of represents that you can only see one path in front of you. At least in this situation, he's been kind of taken away from having the two eyes of his mother, which heterochromia symbolically represents that you have more vision to see different choices, which is cool.
I love that. And to him, it's kind of presumed this is when he's part of the Empire. Her stolen baby is part of the Empire, and he lost his eye during that. So it kind of he only has one path right now. Yeah. Oh, it's so good because, of course, we get to
there's another thing that happens later that kind of gives him the option, which is really cool. So the fight continues, like you said, she drags him to the roof, like you said, but that's, symbolically to drag him out into the open, to drag all this truth out in the open from where it was buried underneath in the building. She drags him up. He's sort of like, the fight is resolving, but she won't fight him. So he ends up getting like more filled with anger as they're fighting. And she starts to explain what happened 20 years ago, that he is her son. And I love this line from him. He said, "How dare you? The Empire's role is to bring order to the galaxy, and I am proud to be its armed wing." And she questions him, and she's like, why do you hide your true nature? Her, like, the eye and his horns and like his skin and his like ears even. Okay. So this whole resolution was fascinating to me because there's a couple of things happening all at the same time. I'm really reminded of, and I was reminded before the reveal at the end too, but the meta that Ty Black did on the little boy with the horns on his head, which is about sort of conflicted young men who end up having sort of little boys who are treated as monsters by the society that they're in, and go through sort of like a symbolic mutilation, and end up only being able to express anger and violence to the outside world. So a lot of the times horns are being cut off in this archetype. And it really, when you see it in stories, it's often a villain who needs to be redeemed, like Ben Solo. It's quite common in Asian media, especially like fantasy genre, Chinese dramas, etc. And it's really an archetype that calls to redemption, to say by like cutting off your shadow or trying to hide your shadow, you're not going to be whole. And you need to seek out those aspects of yourself. This also ties to what Bell Hooks talks about the patriarchy and how little boys are told to cut off and emotionally mutilate themselves to only kind of become violence and anger machines. And so he has lost his eye to appear normal from a patriarchal perspective, and he is fulfilling the good role in the society's eyes of being, its armed wing, a soldier who can only commit violence. And this is what we do to our young men in our society. The archetype itself, Ty talks about in her video, which is really amazing. Go check it out on Wit and Folly. Wit and Folly. That's funny because this is Louise Follies. She ties it like to Where the Wild Things Are. And in the Where the Wild Things Are, the story, the little boy, even though he's been out in the woods with the wild animals and kind of exploring his wild nature, knows that he can always go back home to find a warm meal waiting for him. So it's wild that the mom, Loie, reaches out and hugs him and doesn't let him go and tells him, the Empire already took everything when they ripped you away from me. And the sun rises. So it's like showing this like dawning conclusion to him. And she has to run off to be with her like friends and leaves him with this like piece of her costume, but it also has a hollow and a tracker on it. And it kind of is the same color as one of her eyes. So she's almost like giving him his sight back.
Oh, I love that. All of that. It's so cool. The way it comes together, like you had mentioned, her just grabbing him and hugging, preventing him from fighting, not giving him the option to continue to do that. Like you had said, he's basically been beat down to be part of that order from the Empire, where he says the Empire's role is to bring order. All this mutilation that he's gone through is because you're just a cog in a machine to them.
Yeah.
You are supposed to look and act exactly how they want you to act. Order. You can't be a unique person with your own thoughts and emotions and feelings. And so by cutting off his ability to fight her, by just hugging him, it's such a good way to end the story.
And this is where like our lost boys need sympathy, not hate.
Yes.
Right. And so the reveal at the end, he's on a Star Destroyer and he takes off his hat and it shows like he's got the hollow of him as a baby, and it reveals like his horns as the baby turns around and he takes off his hat, and in the glass of the Star Destroyer's window, we see that his horns have been cut off. What is this show?
It's so good. It is amazing.
So good. I'm obsessed with this symbolism. What did we get?
and that conclusion, like you said, it's so hopeful.
Yeah.
It isn't that, because obviously, if he was stolen as a baby and he's a fully grown man, during that time, he must have done atrocious things.
Yeah.
But it always gives you, but the story, we're always preaching about it, shows that anyone can be redeemed and anyone can have that change in their life occur and pick a different path. I don't know. She
not to make this about Ben Solo, but if
right, I was trying not to make it about him.
But like that's where I'm saying that this archetype, the little boy with the horns on his head, that Ty calls out so expertly in her meta video, is this same thing. It calls for redemption of our lost boys.
And the mother forgives him, just like Ben Solo. Leia, what does she do? She reaches out to her son. That's what she does in trust.
This is what we always wanted.
Yeah, and here Loa, at the end, when she's with her friends, she kind of smiles and says, and it's like she got her hope back. The whole, she was thinking revenge was how she was going to get her freedom. But when she's leaving, she has this smile, and they, kind of zoom off into the galaxy, and you can tell she has her freedom back.
Because she can find him.
Because she knows that she can find him, and he can find her.
Oh, so good. It's like that moment when Leia senses Ben on the ship. it feels the same to me. And this archetype is so valuable for us as a society to see her hug him. Like, they need love. They need a warm meal, like in Where the Wild Things Are. They need to know that they can come home. Oh.
And again, not to make it about Bensel, when he says that he can't go, that when he tells Ray that he can't go home, or she can't go home, just like he can't to Leia. And that's totally not the case. Suddenly I'm pro Trots now. Because it proves that, of course, he can always go home.
Yeah. And I think we need more of that. So this was exceptional. I'm happy it's one of your favorites.
Yes.
It's definitely one of my favorites. All right. Any other further thoughts before we wrap this up?
Nope, that's it. It was amazing. And let's see if we can mention Ben Solo 12 more times. No, I'm kidding.
Hammie, where can people find you if they're looking for you online?
I'm on Twitter @BalancePadawan.
Awesome. We will be back next with the Bandits of Golek. Cheers. Thank you for listening to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host. Our music is orchestral music by Christy Carew for What the Force. You can support the show directly on Patreon at patreon.com/whattheforce. We like to thank all our patrons, especially those who love and are obsessed with What the Force: Melody in Wild Space, How Rude, Anna Perez, Neil, Christian Luca, Carly Ann, Josh Johnson, Scott C., and Susan. Support the show by wearing the Force with our merch. Like and subscribe on YouTube or leave a 5-star review on iTunes or other podcast apps. It helps people find the show. You can connect with us on Twitter at WT Force Show, What the Force Podcast on Facebook. Our website is whattheforce.ca, or you can join the Discord. Links are all in the liner notes. Feel free to reach out and start a conversation. Cheers.